In this part, we've created a bit of a background and I'm just exploring where I can go. Actually, when I look, I don't mind, where I'm up to at the moment. That's perfectly nice. And you might have seen that 1 second image of where we're going. So I'm just making some marks. I've got a few favourites. I like sort of wobbly lines, and I like little hyphen things. Just getting that rhythm and just really playing. If there's anything that I don't like, I can always go over it, and it's just another layer. So all I'm doing is just puddling around. I don't have anything particularly in mind. I'm just trying to get something on the paper. I quite like that. That's my idea of a dragonfly. So they have a couple of sets of wings and a sort of a stick body in the middle. And I quite like breaking down things into, an abstract form. Just seeing where I can go. Finding that little flow of ideas. And I'm pretty happy with that. That again could be the end of my painting. But this middle stage, so I've got my glue and I've done all my collage. This middle stage before I finish things off is where I start to work with composition. Now I've got a little bit of perspex and I've simply put some lines on it. And what I'm doing is I'm looking for where I should put things. So if I make that little dot there the centre of my painting, there it is on the centre, then where else can I find a nice juicy intersection? And you can see, well, there's one around about there. So all I'm doing at the moment is I'm putting a couple of spots, some little guidelines, and I really like working with guidelines. Where else can I go? There you go, there's not an obvious one. So a little bit of a guideline there. And again, I could leave my painting quite happily just the way it is. I kind of like it. It's got nice colours, it's got a nice balance. So all I'm doing now is just mucking around. This isn't a big piece, it's only a piece of paper. So this is where I get to experiment as an artist, and sometimes I make mistakes and sometimes I don't. So let's just have a bit of a look. I've got some chalks and I'm looking at colours. So I like to find out what are the colours that I've got on the paper and try and work with them, and then I need something that pops. So orange really works nicely against that green. But I'm thinking something that's not obvious. So there's this sort of brown, but it's an orangey brown. I kind of like that. So there's my green that most matches what's going. That's probably a bit blue there. Look at that blue. It's a sort of a purpley blue, and it sort of really pops out against that green. So I've got a couple of colours to work with that are nice and mellow, just melting into the painting. And it's just chalk. This is artist's chalk, but I have been known to use hair chalk. Nice and cheap and fun to play with. So now all I'm doing, I know I've got my little 3 marks. I'm probably going to use those as my contrast areas. And now I'm just putting in a little bit of colour in some of the whites and finding out what it looks like when I use it over some of the greens as well. These aren't actually shapes that I'm working with now, it's just the colour. Now at one point, and I'm not sure if it's in this video, things get really overcrowded And that's actually what I'm looking for. So how much can I cram into this sort of layer, this in-between stage? I'm just mopping up the chalk dust because I'm working inside. There's my little marks, 1, 2, 3. And so I'm thinking, okay, let's just circle them. And that might be a nice way to just see what I'm working with. So it's a sort of a diagonal, but it's a bit curvy, going from one corner over to the other. So I could join that up by just putting a little bit of colour up there. So it's sort of leading my eye from the bottom right all the way up to the top left. This may not be where the painting ends up to be, but at the moment I'm still quite liking it. Now, the pop of colour. Where shall I put it? Now, that's one of my known landmarks, one of the 3. So I'm going to use that there. Let's just see what I'm working with again. So if that is now my centre, don't worry about the other 2, then let's have a look and see if there's a little point that I can launch off to. So there's an intersection there. I'll just mark that. Where can I go from there? Nice little intersection, sort of up around there. Okay. So again, it's that sort of curve. I could actually use the chalk and go from the top and just curve all the way down to the bottom in one little stroke. But today, I'm just going to fill in that little curve. Not sure where I'm going to go with that. And this might be where it ends. I'd be happy with that. Again, it's got that nice floaty feeling, a couple of pop colours. And so now I'm just looking again. Where's that in between the 2 blues and then the diagonal of that? Just mop up the extra chalk. If I really wanted to make something darker, I could just come over it with paint. So I've got something happening in the middle. Now I'm just going to fix this. You could use hairspray, that works really well. Give it a bit of a shake. I actually like fixative because I can use it inside and it doesn't smell too bad. The chalks go really bright when you wet them, but then they go pale again when they dry. And fixative as well as hairspray, that's where we're going. Don't worry, I'll show you how we get there. Fixative as well as hairspray has alcohol in it, so it dries really quickly. So I'm going to now use the same sort of colour, and I'm using the dots that I've made in that blue as my guideline. I really like using little dots. I want to leave some of the chalk there. I want to make sure that, there's a reason why I did the chalk. I've got my little guideline. I know exactly where I can put my blue chalk. I could go crazy and put it elsewhere as well. Why not? It's only a piece of paper. And so this brush, again, it's an old brush and it's a bit fuzzy furry, so I'm not getting those nice clean dots that I was actually after. But I've got some ink there, or paint down there, and this paint is actually really nice. I've just dunked my brush in water and now I'm just playing. See how it just sort of goes inky when you put it with water. And so I'm just slowing down and trying not to worry about it being perfect. This is really too much for me, but I do like the colours that I'm getting. There's my dirty water, scrubbing it out on the bottom, nice and clean, and then I check it with my clean water and it should be okay. And so I'm just sitting there and thinking about that for a moment. I've got my colours. Everything seems to be nicely balanced. I'm liking that I can still see the pencil marks. Now, just using my old brush. And this paint still hasn't dried properly. So it means I can water it down. And it's sort of behaving a bit more like watercolour. So watercolour, I tend to dab rather than brush. Look at that, beautiful colour. Just spilling the colour around. For me, this is where things go a little bit too much, a little bit too overboard. But that's just part of the process. It's fine. Where can I go with this? What can I do? Well, for a start off, I really like that blue up against the green, and see how it goes really, really well up against that orange as well. I'm just going to dab with a wet cloth. I want to move or get a little bit of a flow happening. And now I really need to let that dry. The most ideal way to let watercolour or very washy inks dry is to leave them overnight. Now, I haven't done this. I used my hairdryer, but that's okay. So I'm coming in with a white. This isn't a gesso white. This is just it's actually a student quality, and I like that because it's thinner. And I'm just starting to say, okay, where is it just gone a little bit too much for my liking? So being mindful that I want that early layer to still exist. I just don't want it to be as over the top as it has been. So I could put something there now, and I can have that blue just around the edges of whatever happens. Still enjoying those firefly shapes. So I'm just going, snuggling up against them. I've got some nice calmer patches to work with. I would love one day if I could just leave those calm patches, but I don't seem to be able to do that yet. So you'll see I will go over and I'll put something in there later on. All I'm doing is playing, and that's what I mean when I say intuitively playing. I find that using your intuition, unless you've really thought about it a lot and done a lot of work with it, it's sort of confusing to me. So it's just as easier to say, well, how does a child play? Well, stuff happens, they come up with something and they go, ooh, let's try this. So I've got something, I've seen something, and I'm going to use a nice little palette knife, just a plastic one. The thing with palette knives is they make these real scrapey shapes, and I kind of like that. So I'm sort of trying to join my white shapes so that all of the previous colour is just in patches. The dominant feature of the painting now is these white or lighter colours. Again, I'm only coming in and just moving the paint around areas, not trying to blank out the whole painting or the whole of the earlier colour. I like the idea of flow. So you can see I've got a sort of a big flow of paint from the top going down through the centre of the painting over to one side. Makes it all the way down the bottom. And so it's something for the eye to just have a look at. And here I am, just cleaning out my palette knife and then washing it out. So that clear water should stay fairly clear. And then you know you're on the right track. If I scrape again now, I get a thinner layer of my white. I'm just testing it out. You can see that that paper's not stuck down. I'll have to glue that down, but that's for later on when things are drier. At the moment, I've just made a mental note. And look what I've done now. I've just scraped a little bit of the white off, cleaned it on my palette, and off I go again. So I'm using those darker layers, the earlier layers, and letting them shine out against this new whiter layer. It sort of looks textury, and I like that. Sometimes it'll work, and sometimes the paint will be just too dry, but it'll always look interesting. Yep, too dry. But that's okay. Don't forget, that's where our parchment or baking paper is. So I'm not expecting that to work too well anyway. Okay, so some gel medium, and I like the matte medium so that it's not glossy. Now, I have dried my painting. Here I am showing you. And I've dried the back of the page because it's still feeling damp. You'll feel it feels cool to the touch, and that's when you know it's still holding water. So if you can leave it overnight, it's really good. That's what I would recommend. And if you're just having fun and having a go, then give it a whirl with the hairdryer. Now that I've got it all dry to the touch, now I can start to put some gel medium, just thick glue really. And I've used a painting knife so that I can slide it underneath my paper without upsetting things too much. Now I'm going to put a little bit on top, and I can just use my fingers for that. And I need to just sort of get enough glue on. Yeah, it's really, it's really ripping apart. But get enough glue there. Glue likes to stick with glue. So a little bit on the paper, a little bit on the substrate, that's my magazine paper, and then I'm just pressing and holding, making sure that it glues. A little bit of baking paper over the top of all of that, and a bit of a scrub with something hard. That's going to really help as well. But I'm just going to dry it. Can you see that the paper's starting to crinkle? And I actually like that. I like it because it makes a shape that I could never have planned. So this in-between stage is where you really get to have fun. It's kind of mindful. You do have your little guidelines in place, not going crazy, but I'm just doing lots of little experiments. And here's another little experiment. Which way is up? There's lots to look at. Where is the eye comfortably moving around the page? That's what I'm really looking for. And I do love that little arc. I'm sort of very, very in love with that little arc. Now, I've got in the back of my mind where I'm going, but I'll leave you to decide. Which way is up for you? which way allows your eye to see all of the painting and to find little bits and these little, what I call flow lines. Can you see that? There's a flow line going there. Wouldn't that be interesting if it was like a bucket with water? So in part 3, we'll start to put things in place, finding themes.